Discover the power of music to heal and uplift. Introducing NeuroVibe, where rhythm meets recovery. NeuroVibe fuses ambient music textures with rhythmic layers to create music that goes beyond relaxation. It's crafted to resonate deeply, perfect for relaxation, self-reflection, or therapeutic sessions. NeuroVibe invites you to connect with your inner self through immersive sound. Explore NeuroVibe today on SoundCloud and experience the transformative power of music. Tune in, find your vibe, and discover what NeuroVibe can do for you. For more information, check out NeuroVibe on SoundCloud today at soundcloud.com/NeuroVibe-brainspotting. NeuroVibe is intended for general wellness and relaxation purposes and is not a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Explore NeuroVibe now on SoundCloud. Dive in, find your rhythm, and feel better with NeuroVibe.
Welcome to Untying Knots, Minds and Souls Untethered with Perry Clark. This program looks at mental health from unique perspectives and shows you how to manage your life by finding the knots that help you and stay away from the ones that could be a disadvantage. Now, here is your host, Perry Clark.
Hello all, welcome back to Untying Knots, Minds and Souls Untethered. I'm Perry Clark, licensed marriage and family therapist here in the San Francisco Bay Area. So I want to remind you, as always, that this podcast is for entertainment and educational purposes only. It does not constitute working with a licensed mental health professional. Please seek one out in your area to work on your unique issues. So today's podcast is also me keeping something I said earlier this month as being true. But our guest today I encountered, I think it was last year, so 2024, as we were on a panel talking about a number of things about horror with the good friends of Jackson Elias Horror Gaming Weekend, which is part of the Blasphemous Tomes network. And we were talking about a number of various things that comes into playing horror games, let alone the writing and the creating of them. And so this year, again, at the same kind of convention, our guest here was the moderator for a panel that was on, and you can find both last year's and this year's topics on the YouTube channel, which is the good friends of Jackson Elias. And this year we were talking about moving beyond Western horror. So our moderator for that was Stephen Wall. Stephen Wall holds a Ph.D. in folklore from Memorial University of Newfoundland. He is a contributing author to the forthcoming publication Broken Reflections and the Illusions and the Borderlands for Kult Divinity Lost, as well as an author at the Miskatonic Repository scenario. Author of the Miskatonic Repository scenario, Somebody Think of the Children, for the Call of Cthulhu role-playing game. Deplorable Media, his sole proprietor imprint, is focused on creating resources that bring well-researched horror and verisimilitude to tabletop role-playing. He has a growing collection of essays, scenario hooks, and short fictions available at a Deplorable Meeting. And come to think of it, when I met him in 2014, he was going by the Deplorable Rat.
Yeah, it's actually Delapore.
Oh, Delapore. Well, yeah. To me, it comes out as deplorable.
No, I apologize for the fact that I seem to create things that just have tongue twisters.
Yeah, but some of that, again, is my neurodiversity and how my dyslexia looks at something and sometimes it will find the closest thing that makes sense or similarity to it and go straight to it, even if it's the wrong word.
Okay.
I mean, hey, some people have the issue of switching letters. I will switch entire words.
Okay.
Just so my brain can process and keep going. But as you can hear, welcome, Stephen, to Untying Knots.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for being here. And as I was saying, during our last panel, it was actually on non-Western horror. Most of the people there were all people who have been on the podcast, except for you. And so at this point, I said, everybody's on the podcast. I was like, well, I need to get him on, so that's true.
Well, thank you so much for the opportunity. I really appreciate it. It's nice to be kind of on this side of things. I've been an obsessive podcast listener for a long time, normally to things involving comedy and politics, occasionally role-playing games. I mean, good friends of Jackson Elias, but never really been on one of these before, so this is kind of a cool opportunity, and hopefully I can say something of interest.
Oh, I think that's very easy to happen. But we'll start off with my classic question. How did you get here?
Okay, and I will give you the best answer that I can construct on this one. So, I got here by wearing a series of faces that were not me. And eventually I ran out of materials with which to construct my masks, and all that was left was to be myself. And, I mean, if we want to kind of put a fine point on it, kind of like a timestamp as to where that occurred, it was about the time that I was watching my father's casket being placed into an above-ground crypt. And that was when the last of the papier-mâché that I'd been hiding behind kind of fell away. I mean, it probably didn't happen right then, but poetically, that's when it happened.
And I think a lot of us can, will openly or not so openly, acknowledge that same experience. I know I lost my father this year as well, and it's been reorganizing life around that.
Yeah. It is a challenging experience even when you have a challenging relationship with that person. Sure. And I would say that I had a very challenging relationship with my father for a number of years. Around the time I was 14 years old, he kind of stopped being the man I was familiar with. He began to have significant visual and auditory hallucinations and constructed kind of a paranoid lattice work of ideas from those. And there were some harrowing moments that followed that.
Understandable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so a lot of that is built into why I ended up, bumping into you at the good friends of Jackson Elias online conventions, and why I go to Necronomicon and stuff like that, is because, I mean, for me, it is a way to play in a space that is otherwise deeply traumatizing and uncomfortable. And yeah, my father was he was someone that I felt a lot of complex emotions about. A lot of love and a lot of sadness and a lot of grief even before he died, but then also a lot of anger and a lot of frustration. I never really got to be myself around him.
Right.
And that has, I think, a lot to do with who I am now. And kind of that moment of his passing was just a moment to break with previous patterns and live a little bit more authentically, as close to authentic as I can, if an authentic exists.
I think that's very true, and it's a challenge that a lot of people get into. And sometimes it's actually easier done in some regards when the fact that some of the relationships that you've lived with and hadn't with are going to try and keep things the same, even if this person's gone and you're not there anymore.
Yeah. And I was talking to one of my partners yesterday about this, and we were just kind of in the car, and was trying to practice a little bit, get ready for this. And so I kind of mentioned the idea that it is a transformative thing to have someone important have their life stop and have their narrative come to an end. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, yours continues.
Mm-hmm.
And if I think about kind of how that impacts my life, I think I do that both as a son to my father and a Lovecraftian to Lovecraft. I think there's one of the first essays I wrote compared kind of standing at my father's graveside and standing at Lovecraft's graveside. Mm-hmm. And how those two experiences are similar, because these are men with which I have a complicated relationship with. And there's, there can be love and appreciation and even kind of fellowship, but then there can also be frustration and anger and severe disappointment.
Mm-hmm.
But the unique thing is when somebody passes and you continue on. I mean, they talk about the idea that funerals are for the living.
Yeah.
Like you have the opportunity now that life has stopped to peel through it and examine it in detail and pick it apart and deconstruct it. And I don't want to shy away from that, either with my dad or with Lovecraft. I don't want to, I want to look at that head on and figure out what's going on there, because I think in poking around in those lives, I discover things about them, but I also discover things about my own biases. And it's a mirror that I can measure myself up to, and a mirror that I can comfortably do that, because that image in the mirror is not going to move. It can just, sit there, and I can look at it and I can take my time with it.
So I'm wondering how much of that also is stuff that you've used in your works when you're creating stuff for Miskatonic as well as for Kult.
Oh, well, I would definitely say that yeah, how I view Lovecraft definitely impacts how I deal with his mythos. I mean, I think one of the really cool things, is as difficult as it is to confront Lovecraft, I think anybody who is in kind of the weird fiction space has the unique opportunity to play in what he left behind to whatever extent we wish. Because that's the thing with Inheritance. He's dead. Everything that he was, because of the way that his literary executorship shook out, everything that he was belongs to us.
Mm-hmm.
And so we can take that in whatever direction we want. And in examples prior to, I saw people, prior to kind of writing my own work, I saw people take it in whole kind of different directions. I saw people like Victor Laval. I saw people like I think it was Matt Ruff. Saw people like Willem Pugmire all take Lovecraft in these kind of different directions that reflected their own lives. And I said to myself, wow, okay, they can do that, so can I.
Mm-hmm. The Battle of the Black Dom.
Yeah, I took what I had. Somebody Think of the Children is kind of a love letter to my weird suburban Americana retro 90s teenage years.
Mm-hmm.
I was living in a small city called Visalia, California. They are, the city itself is very excited about the fact that it has more churches than bars.
Mm-hmm.
It's that kind of city. I was going to a Christian high school. There were lots of kind of mega churches and things like that around us, and sort of big religious organizations. And then in the midst of this, there was me discovering Vampire the Masquerade and wanting to be a goth kid, and, having interesting feelings reading certain parts of Anne Rice novels and trying to explore, what I was and what I wanted to be against this very, very particular kind of suburban backdrop that you had in the 90s.
Mm-hmm. Which, and just for those interested, Ain't Slayed Nobody did a recording of that, too.
They did, yeah.
Yes, and so we'll try to also have a link to that recording AP play performance in the show notes if we can.
Yeah, no, that was a lot of fun to see them do. That was, and for what little I was involved in it, that was very exciting. And, again, it felt, I listened to a lot of podcasts. Podcasts make up kind of background noise in my daily routine. So having that happen, it made me feel like I was making kind of a contribution to the cultural heritage of tabletop role playing. So that was kind of a cool moment, and I'm really glad that we could Cuppy and I could come together and make that work the way we did.
Yes, it was an amusing listen through because I know I've sat through and listened to it.
Yeah, no, it was it's always interesting to see your work go out beyond you and, know that you can't really touch it or anything like that. And
for it to become another mirror to see what's developing.
Yeah. And maybe to wonder, okay, how is my image kind of distorted in this mirror? What happened to it? And maybe examine what occurred or what I didn't think about or anything like that. It was, I would say that I very much enjoyed the production. It wasn't like any time that I ever ran it, though.
Mm-hmm.
But that's okay. I think that's, and that's, because the thing is, it's not going, when you put your work out there, it's not going to be near and dear to other people's hearts the way it is yours.
And it's never going to be played with the same rhythm and sense that you have towards it and the pacing and so forth.
Because there's all these unconscious things that you don't even think about.
Yeah.
That or are involved
things that you've drawn or things that you've drawn in the improving that others won't.
Yeah, exactly. Things that are obvious to you on one end, but are not obvious on the other side of it.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I mean, with putting together Delapore Media, that was something I kind of had to come to terms with. I mean, at least when like the first comments started to come in on things.
Mm-hmm.
Because
to that end, and what you're saying, and I apologize for interrupting you, I think that's something that we don't often hear about from many other creators, is that aspect of dealing with that. And that is an inherent part of dealing with the aspect of putting your media out, and especially in a form that anyone can take and apply to their table.
Yeah. Yeah, or just anybody can read.
Mm-hmm.
And suddenly they have an insight into you, and it may not even be an insight that you thought about. I'll bring in a little bit of a funny anecdote at this point. My latest thing that I put out it wasn't really tabletop role playing related. I had this kind of need to write down a story. It's a very short story. It's called The Near Future.
Mm-hmm.
And it is you could kind of call it kind of a political science fiction story. But putting it out there, and I mean, just like anything else, I publicized it and all of that, and I'm talking to my mother maybe like a week or a week and a half later. And and she brings up, "Oh, I read your story." And, there was this sudden kind of like freezing, got to hold on for panic moment as I think about, my mom read a story where I I mean, it was a brief reference, but I talked about cuck porn in it. And that was a roller coaster of adult and childhood emotions. And, it was just, it shocked me. And then she goes on to say, and this is the great part. My mom always has some kind of, she says one thing and then she'll follow up with something else that just surprises you. She's like, oh, I guess the ending, like a third of the way through, I knew where you were going with this. And then she kind of explains to me why. And mm-hmm. It's just like, kind of a 1-2 punch there experience.
Well, especially in that standpoint that somebody understood how you think.
Yeah, a little bit, or that how I think and how I was trying to trick the reader could be so obvious. And suddenly I'm back and I'm 10 years old trying to get away with lies to my mother.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
again.
What's obvious for some isn't obvious for others. And it's like also the standpoint that the flowers of common sense really do not grow in every garden, even though we'd like to think they do.
Yeah, and everybody truly grows their own flowers, and what you consider to be interesting or attractive or beautiful, I mean, once it hits outside you have no control over that.
Mm-hmm.
And how people are going to react and what it's going to stir up, because, I mean, everybody's kind of going through their own thing anyway.
Right.
So they're going to apply, your readers and your listeners and all of that are going to apply their own experience to,
which also makes it hard but also interesting, because I'm circling back here to what it means to be dealing with grief and loss and the other components that you find in reviewing the person's lives, or not just, and I'll be frank, not just that person's lives, but the relationships you have with the other people that are also connected to them.
Yeah, no, that, thinking back to the supper we had immediately following my father's burial, and that was kind of a weird experience. That was a sense of, it definitely gave me a sense of how different I was and how different things had turned out, because, I mean, it was one of the first times I'd returned to what was arguably my hometown, or one of my hometowns.
Mm-hmm.
In years. I hadn't been back in ages, and so much had changed, so much had stayed the same, and there was so much of a sense that I just didn't belong there, that,
mm-hmm.
I mean, I wanted to get home to St. John's, because, I mean, that's where I felt home was. And so that was a very tricky experience, that whole kind of after the fact, dealing with the people in my father's life that were, well, friends or associates, and what they had to say regarding him and everything. Because, I mean, it was also happening around, it was happening in 2021, so, I mean, it was right around around COVID. Central California was not a big mask wearing community, so I was out of place. My sister was out of place, because, I mean, she'd moved on a long time ago and didn't really want to set foot there again. I'd moved on. So much had changed.
Mm-hmm. Which, so much, and I'll be frank, so much of what you've just spoken about in that own personal life experience is so much of a theme we find in horror. Quite a bit.
Yeah, that sense of what is home, what was home. I wrote something before Somebody Think of the Children. It was kind of a first attempt, and I tried to write about my hometown, or my childhood hometown, which was actually not Visalia, but an even smaller town called Springville. It's up in the foothills of the Sierra Nevadas. It was one of those towns that was founded around Soda Spring. And I mean, it had like a tuberculosis clinic and stuff like that there. That was kind of one of its main features. But I just remember things about my childhood feels very weird and very distant, and very peculiar. It made me realize just how much of an anxious person I am and how long I had been an anxious person. Kind of terrified, being 4 and 5 years old and terrified of the adults around me. Everything felt bigger than life. Everything felt carnivalesque. I remember my mother used to take me to the donut shop in Springville, and this was back when you could still smoke indoors in California, and looking around at, it was my great aunt and all her kind of retiree friends who had lived in that town all their lives. And I mean, there was newspapers, and there was coffee, there was donuts, and there was cigarettes. There were so many cigarettes. And just like to the point that the wallpaper was peeling and turning yellow at the edges. And there was, of course, it was a mountain town too. So everybody had taxidermy on their walls, and like the pheasants and the deer and all of that were kind of matted and mangy from just the volume of cigarette smoke and donut grease that was in that place. And then me at 4 years old, I remember encountering the man behind the counter that made these things. And they were wonderfully delicious donuts. The man looked like a nightmare Santa Claus. Great big white beard, yellow all around the white, greasy apron, and of course you're 4 years old, so, you've never really encountered somebody, say, who went to the Vietnam War and came home with one leg. So encountering that as well, having him come out from behind the counter and try and greet me, and, me just hiding behind my mother or my great aunt or whoever I could. But it just, as a child, things are very carnivalesque because they're just so much bigger than life, and you remember things that when you come back to it, they're not there anymore. And it was like, were they ever there? Or was it just in my head?
Which so describes horror.
Yeah.
So I think that's a lovely place for us to take a break here. So stay tuned, folks. We will be back in our second half. I'm Perry Clark, licensed marriage and family therapist, here with author Dr. Stephen Wall. And we're going to continue talking about so many things, horror as well as maybe a little grief. But stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Our lives and the world around us can get messy and frustrating. Untangle and Grow Counseling's focus is to untangle that mess and make sense of it, so you have a good foundation to build and grow from. Visit us on the web at untangleandgrowcounseling.com. Perry Clark offers individual psychotherapy, couples and family therapy, and adolescence therapy from a variety of coping materials and resources. Visit untangleandgrowcounseling.com for more information.
Discover the power of music to heal and uplift. Introducing NeuroVibe, where rhythm meets recovery. NeuroVibe fuses ambient music textures with rhythmic layers to create music that goes beyond relaxation. It's crafted to resonate deeply, perfect for relaxation, self-reflection, or therapeutic sessions. NeuroVibe invites you to connect with your inner self through immersive sound. Explore NeuroVibe today on SoundCloud and experience the transformative power of music. Tune in, find your vibe, and discover what NeuroVibe can do for you. For more information, check out NeuroVibe on SoundCloud today at soundcloud.com/NeuroVibe-brainspotting. NeuroVibe is intended for general wellness and relaxation purposes and is not a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Explore NeuroVibe now on SoundCloud. Dive in, find your rhythm, and feel better with NeuroVibe.
Follow Voice America at facebook.com/Voice America for juicy updates from your favorite radio shows and podcasts.
You are listening to Untying Knots, Minds and Souls Untethered. If you have a question or comment about our podcast, send an email to pclark@untyingknotspodcast.com. That's pclark@untyingknotspodcast.com. And now, back to the program.
Welcome back, folks, to Untying Knots, Minds and Souls Untethered. I'm Perry Clark, licensed marriage and family therapist, here with Dr. Stephen Wall, author, folklorist, and we've been talking a bit about definitely grief, horror, personal experience, and just also some of the writing process. And that carnival you were just talking about, of what you experienced, just reflecting back on your life as a 4-year-old, and as I think I also said, how much it brings into what you create in your media and so forth. So, and we were talking about Think of the Children, but you have another major project group that you work with, which is the Kult Divinity Lost game series.
That's right. So just to kind of give a little bit of a brief overview, it's hard to explain what Kult is. But I will start by saying that it was developed in Sweden. I remember being in, I want to say in university, and seeing maybe the 3rd edition of the book come out. It was one of those, it had one of those reputations in the 80s, or the late 80s, early 90s when it showed up, kind of similar to the, if you've ever heard of kind of the video nasties scandal in the UK. The idea that certain media was banned in Europe. We didn't really get it in the United States because, of course, at least for a while, you couldn't ban media in the United States. But in Europe, Kult had a reputation. It was almost, I almost kind of look back on it jokingly. People say D&D is satanic, and Kult was the game that said, "Oh, you want a satanic role-playing game? Let's show you a satanic role-playing game." So from the land of black metal came Kult, which was, I would describe it as a Gnostic horror role-playing game, and kind of it takes the horror image, it takes the imagery of the clockmaker. If you've kind of ever heard that theory of God, the idea that God wound up the universe and then walked away. And we are all still spinning like the interior of a clock. It takes that and bends it toward horror. God walked away, and so when the clock broke, no one was there to fix it. And so Kult is this game where it is a supernatural horror game. That much is true, but it's also a game of... It's a game where worlds bleed through into each other. It is a game. I have run games of Kult that feel like Salvador Dali paintings. Those truly kind of abstract experiences. And Kult is a game where you can walk around a corner in a museum and find yourself in hell. Maybe not your hell, but somebody else's hell. And so Kult affords the opportunity to play with lots of different imagery and ideas. And the way I got involved with them, the way I got involved with Helmgast, the publisher, was I wrote a fan piece. It's on my blog, delaporemedia.com. It's called Welcome to the Rest Home. And it's actually based on another kind of carnivalesque experience that I had, not in childhood, but in my high school years. I went to a Christian school, so the understanding was that we should do some charity work. And so the Bible study classes, because we had Bible class, it was Christian school, and once a week we would go and we would perform volunteer work, service, that sort of thing. I was a freshman in high school, And they sent me and a couple of other, they sent me and a few other freshmen to a retirement home, to a rest home. I was not prepared for what I saw there. And what I heard,
most people aren't.
Most importantly, what I smelled in that place. This was not a place that could cover up the lingering experience of aging into the point of decay, of that kind of slow death. Death is not a kind process. I think we do a lot in our culture to make it look kind, to hide or ignore it completely. Again, I'd never set foot in such a place. But to be there and I was paired with another kid. I remember his name was Josh. And we were put side by side with these two guys that were kind of sharing a room. And there was Chester, and then there was Chester's roommate. I don't remember much about Chester's roommate, other than Josh began coming over to visit Chester with me because he didn't want to be anywhere near Chester's roommate. Because Chester's roommate would talk to himself, and he would shit himself and scream. And he would have waking nightmares. And I just remember there was this one, I wrote it down about and put it in my blog, but there was this time where he sat up and he looked at the two of us, and as he was losing control of his bowels, he looked right at us and he says, No, don't do that. That's not a Christian way to bury a man. And it's just like, man, what the hell did you see in Korea? And it was wild. And then there was Chester, who was... Chester was like that character that's always in the background of every prison movie exchanging things for cigarettes. He was a constant kind of manipulator of the other people in the care home, of the nurses, of the staff, and it was just a wild experience. And I just tucked it away like it was nothing. It was a semester of my life that I lived. Actually, not a semester, a full year. That was a year-long Bible course that I did. And so every Monday we went over to the rest home. I got through it by telling Chester dirty jokes. That was the way I handled it at the time. You know, he would roar laughing at any kind of dirty joke that I could dig up, and the internet was very young at that point. So I mean, that's basically kind of the stuff you could find, text files that had, 100 of the filthiest jokes you could imagine. So I'd, bring him one a week and live through that experience. But later on, I went back, I went through the experience. I wrote this thing called Welcome to the Rest Home. The Kult people grabbed it. Or I should say the Kult people. Helmgast took a look at it. I mean, my editor, Gabe, there is great. He's just, he's been so helpful. And he looked at my stuff initially and said, yeah, this is pretty amazing. And he passed it on to the creative director. The creative director, we end up having a conversation over Discord, and he says, yeah, I need more of this blood and shit writing that you do. And I'd never really had anybody kind of call out what I do before, but he liked it. He likened it to certain. He made comparisons that were uncomfortable to me, and that they were authors that were way better than me. But he liked it enough that he did this. He gave me a spot in Broken Reflections. I put together a piece called it's probably going to be called Crossroads or The Crossroads, and it's essentially about wandering into the middle of nowhere, finding the worst truck stop in America, and encountering on top of that a very unfeeling God. and having to live through that experience in order to escape this nowhere place. The other interesting thing about Broken Reflections and some aspects of Cult, and Cult in general, is that you don't always start with a pre-planned character sheet. Broken Reflections, all of the pieces are what they call horror starters. So you put together you just kind of arrive with a blank character sheet, and the GM starts with, like, you start with the same question every time. How did you get here? Who are you? And you start to build that character in media res. It becomes kind of half an improv act. And the GM has to be able to react to that a little bit. And so Crossroads is a story that can have multiple outcomes, multiple conflicts, depending on how the players construct their characters. So the GM kind of has the opportunity to plant a villain or an obstacle in front of the players that match their improvised characters.
Which I can see where the struggle for those that want not just the heroic narrative, but they want that rail aspect of they will always be the hero, would struggle with systems like this.
Yeah, I would say that if you... And again, not to compare myself or anything, but I love David Lynch. Been a big fan of his easily since one of my partners introduced me to Twin Peaks about 10 years ago. And the Lynchian hero is not always heroic. The Lynchian hero is very human, but also very abstract in some ways, and their logic is kind of dream logic, and if anything, Crossroads is my attempt at the Lynchian, or what Lynchian horror is what that kind of dream logic horror is meant to feel like. I mean, I think it really depends on how you run it, whether that would be successful. But that's what inspired me. It was definitely David Lynch's perspective on Americana that inspired me, which is why the truck stop ended up there. I mean, the truck stop is a feature of Americana. It was something that I researched actually using. This was kind of where my folklore background came into it. I learned when I was in grad school that sometimes even if people wouldn't tell you their stories, they still love to put them down in places. And, if you dig through the internet enough, you're going to find specialty forums for all sorts of things. And I don't know what got me onto the idea. I think it was because I was organizing like a pitch for Helmgast. But I ended up digging through trucker forums. And these guys that, I might not be able to approach them and talk to them and like put a tape recorder in front of them or anything. But they wanted their stories of the worst truck stop they'd ever been to recorded in some capacity. They just kind of wanted to say it in their own way. And I mean, the beauty part is, well, maybe not the beauty part, because I don't think we realize on the internet just how much we leave for public consumption.
Which becomes that standpoint of just, you never know how the media and what you're creating is going to be received or used, or, as we've said, become the satanic panic. Whether it's in the U.S. or in the Europe.
No, the it's kind of interesting. That brings me back to Somebody Think of the Children. I mean, that is a satanic panic, sort of late satanic panic story, in that it focuses on that when I was growing up and in high school, the Kentucky vampire slayings happened. I don't know if you're familiar with those or not, but
I think that's what sort of became associated with the satanic panic.
Well, yeah, that was Vampire the Masquerade getting involved with it, as opposed to Dungeons and Dragons. Basically, a 19-year-old kid got a hold of Vampire the Masquerade, and also a handful of books from the library, ranging from kind of psychology textbooks on up to like how to win friends and influence people. And he ended up founding himself a little sex cult. And yeah, they eventually, there was a killing that occurred in Florida over it. And it was quite a mess, but I mean, it definitely sparked outrage through the Christian community, and there was this whole kind of among evangelicals, a second wave of the Satanic Panic in the 90s, just around the vampire role-playing games.
Right. Okay, that's the one I was like, wait a minute, the Satanic Panic was in the 80s. What was going on in the 90s? And I wasn't yet at that point where I was enough into gaming to recognize it, but now hearing this is like, okay, that makes complete sense.
Yeah, no, I missed out on the first wave of the Satanic Panic because I was born in 1979, and I didn't really discover D&D until I was like on a bus trip in junior high with like a flag football team, I want to say, and I looked over and I saw a person in 7th grade, and they had this like little sheet out, and they were basically using a piece of notebook paper to construct a character sheet. And that was, D&D was very was very much a folk art thing, and I mean, it was folk knowledge. It was the kind of thing where we didn't really have the books where I lived, but we would find ways, like somebody would have the books, and then we would Xerox copy some of them, and then we would copy those copies and copy the copies of copies, and eventually you couldn't even see the pictures in the monster's manual, but you could sort of make out what the stats were, and you could kind of put something together, because it was just at that time, and all the parents had just come off the Satanic Panic, so nobody was going to buy D&D books for their kids.
Right. Although I'm going to tell you right now, what you just described with that photocopies, even though it's something we all really have lived with, there's another story.
Yeah, no, Xerox lore is a thing in folklore. It's kind of gone by the wayside just because we've turned everything's gone digital. But Xerox lore for a long time was part of that, or like fax machine lore. Like you used to get. You used to find things in the copier at work that would be, that would be like chain letters and stuff like that, or you'd get them through the fax machine.
Right.
But yeah,
I don't know, modern printer and scanner.
No, folklore always finds a way. The ideas of it are just kind of dug into us to the point that they'll always wrap themselves around our technology, whatever they look like. And so, what was backmasking on like a record or on a tape, it finds the idea that Satan is putting messages into pop music and stuff like that still makes its appearance today, just differently. Folklore is very adaptive.
Something's got to... Yeah, because sound studios aren't as soundproof as we've always been led to believe, thanks to media. It's like, even right now, I'm sure to those that have that sensory capacity, they might hear the fan in the background, especially because we're recording this during summer months, or my AC unit, and what was done to mask that so that you can still enjoy all the things we're talking about, but somehow it's just easy for the mind to fill in.
The little artifacts and stuff like that, the little either digital or audio artifacts, and kind of what they mean and how you can make something out of that. That's Claude Lévi-Strauss, who was like an old anthropologist, had a great term for this, or used a great term, I should say. It existed before, but the term he would use is bricolage. And I mean, it was originally intended, I think, as an architectural style to kind of indicate how people built kind of shanty structures and the like. But bricolage happens in the human mind all the time. We take those those things, those pieces that we have, and we find ways to wedge them together. The human mind is very good at that. It is very good at connecting dots that should not be connected. But because we need an explanation, they get connected. And the dot ends up going through, the line between the dots ends up going through a place that may not entirely be real.
And hence the clock got wound up and God walked away after it broke, and it broke.
That's true. I mean, that's the explanations we give. Yeah, no, that the angels are bowling. That's what thunder and lightning are. That sort of thing. We find ways to explain to ourselves how the world works, because we would be driven mad otherwise. It points, one thing this year has been tough for me in that, I think it's been tough for a lot of us, realistically. I mean, one thing that I have found whenever I see political news that is too overwhelming for me, I will intentionally distance myself from it and try to read something extremely difficult or taxing, something that just absorbs 100% of my attention. And one thing that I did this last year around election time with Alison Rumfitt's Tell Me I'm Worthless, which is a very challenging book was a very challenging book for me to get through. And I think, honestly, I mean, it would be for anyone. It's a very kind of gripping here and now political horror story about a house haunted by fascism, and about the modern, the contemporary struggles of trans identity, that sort of thing. This year, I turned to something. I managed to accomplish that. I managed to get through that one. So this year, I went even deeper when I kind of felt down. And I grabbed Thomas Ligotti's Conspiracy Against the Human Race. Ligotti is kind of a horror writer's horror writer, but this was his attempt to step out of that and maybe write a little bit of philosophy. I don't know if it entirely came together in a way that made sense to me, but there were some bits and pieces in that really got me thinking. The idea that, we may not actually experience consciousness. We may just think we're experiencing consciousness. We are primates who have evolved memory, and we have evolved emotion that attaches to memory. And so this is how our memories are meaningful, and this is how we have recall of things. Was kind of the one of the ideas in this book, and we frame these emotions attached to memory as consciousness. But what Ligotti, from his very kind of, very nihilistic, I want to say, perspective, asks is, is that actually consciousness? Is attaching emotion to memory enough to make consciousness, or are we just going through life like any other animal species that we would consider not conscious? Worms don't have memory or emotion, but they still do all the things that they do. Is what we have as human beings really that special? Kind of a dark thought to end on, but I think that is this is I am a person, if nothing else, I'm a person who is willing to look at my own dark thoughts and have those conversations. I feel like that's necessary. I think we are in a day and age where to bring it back to the mirror, I think we are in a day and age where as a society, we need to be looking at the mirror a little bit more.
And dealing with what is actually being reflected back at us. And I think that's a lovely place for us to reflect onto the aspect question of myths and realities around mental health. Myths and realities around mental health.
Okay.
Because, I mean, there's another place where folklore comes up with just the entire
the idea
of mental health.
Yeah. Our whole kind of notion of what is, to use words that you shouldn't be using in psychology. I mean, but you use them in horror all the time. Madness, insanity, craziness. These are truly words that don't belong in a therapist's office, but they do turn up in horror because horror is about making you uncomfortable in a safe way. But I mean, in terms of what is a myth and what is a reality in mental health for me, the idea that you can be cured, I think that is a huge myth. The idea that there is sanity and insanity, that there is that somehow you can step from one to the other. No, that's not how it works. I think it's much more of a spectrum. I think that it's something that is a working on your mental health is a lifelong project. It is something that, you might put down or pick up from time to time. You might seriously focus on it, but I mean, it's always there. And you are trying to tie this into something I was reading about the other day. The idea that, I mean, you can never step away from your own mind. And, your mind is, if we do, I was thinking about this the other day and how, John Eccles, this is the suggested we live in three worlds. We have a body, we have a brain that controls the body, we have a mind that pilots the brain. And so the mind never touches the physical. That was kind of the interesting thing. I was looking at it from a theoretical physics perspective. But the notion is that you're never going to get away from the things that are bothering you mental health wise. You have to work on them because they are literally part of the pilot mechanism that controls that you use to control your vehicle in life.
Right.
I think
right. Because especially the idea that there is some sort of perfect idealized human out there, and people who are living those lives are like, where are they? How are they doing this? How are they maintaining that, given everything else the rest of us are dealing with? And that's an impossibility.
Well, and we've had, that notion of, the kind of the perfection of a life form or something like that. I mean, the first time, I'm sure it was around before that, but I go back to Aristotle and Plato talking about the form of the beautiful. Kind of the perfect specimen of a bird or a flower or something like that. I mean, we have been searching for that since their time, and we have not found it. I don't think it's there.
Right. It's the illusion.
It absolutely is. It is it is our attempt to connect the dots in life in a way that is with the information that we have. And unfortunately, it is much better to just look at yourself honestly in the mirror and to see your flaws, to see society's flaws reflected in you. And as we kind of wind up, that's just kind of my thought here is, if I want to say anything to anybody who might be listening to this, have those tough conversations. It's worth it.
Even if there isn't always an answer.
That's the thing about a tough conversation. There isn't an answer.
And that may also be part of that struggle then where somebody is certain they have to have an answer. Or that there is an answer. And there is some of what perpetuates it.
Because we don't have to have there is no finality to that tough conversation, just like there is no finality to mental health.
Mm-hmm.
Just like there is no finality to understanding someone like Lovecraft or your own parent that you had a difficult relationship with. You don't have to have an answer, but doing the work. I think that's the work. It makes life worth living for me. I mean, I don't know about anybody else, but I mean that feels like a life well lived, is a life where you have those tough conversations with yourself or about society. You face the mirror.
Mm-hmm. So, we continue to face the mirror. And I think there's also a title for a new game there, too.
Maybe.
Yeah. So, I want to thank you for coming on, and now we have a complete set from our last panel. Where can folks find you if they want to find more, play some more of your games?
Okay. My pieces for Kult Divinity Lost are forthcoming. They will presumably, a Kickstarter just finished. A Kickstarter just finished earlier this year, so presumably sometime next year you'll start to see the collections for the newest collections for Kult Divinity Lost come out, and that is the Illusion in Borderlands book, as well as Broken Reflections, and there's also a couple of others. You can find Somebody Think of the Children. You can find that on Drive-Thru RPG. Just put in Somebody Think of the Children. If you want to have a look at my blog, it's at delaporemedia.com. DELAPORE media. No spaces. And yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And all of the information there is free. There's free scenario hooks. There's free gaming material. That is just kind of my space to present myself. My goal is I want to bring verisimilitude to the tabletop, is what I want to do. That being the sense of realness, those markers of the real. I want to bring that to gaming a little bit more and kind of find those things that feel real and can give us the experience in a tabletop game of, yeah, that feels like something that might happen. I mean, even though there's, maybe supernatural or fantasy aspects of it, I like it when games have that, yeah, this is plausible. And so I'm always kind of looking for those little things that make playing games, running games, playing characters feel plausible.
Very good. So hopefully that's something everyone else wants too. No. So again, thank you. And I wish everybody well as we move forward onto this. And we need to look in the mirror.
Thank you for tuning in for Untying Knots, Minds and Souls Untethered. Be sure to join your host, Perry Clark, for another episode on the podcast coming soon on the Voice America Empowerment Channel.